From Ken Burns and Lynn Novick, it was exactly what America wanted, and it caught us completely by surprise. It turned citizens into criminals, and criminals into kings. It changed the very nature of our democracy twice. Prohibition.
What a stupid idea it was that people actually thought you could get away with this. That you could actually ban alcohol, completely eliminate its usage in American society. It's a preposterous idea.
Virtually every part of the Constitution is about expanding human freedom, except prohibition, in which human freedom was being limited. Then we get in trouble.
It was a struggle between small towns and big cities, the wets and the dries, with the whole country caught in the middle.
It's not that sin is so terrible, it's that sin is very attractive. And that's why we're always tempted to do it. So what you need then is to help people. And if necessary, sometimes you have to make sin illegal. What it would mean in practice was going to have to be worked out through the legal system. Because to pass a law in the real world means nothing. To enforce the law means everything.
You drank to show that you were a man, but you get drunk and all of a sudden you can't provide for your family, you can't do your job.
It was a time when women found their voice and helped to change the nation.
The women gather in front of a saloon and they start praying. And the movement takes off like wildfire.
And our greatest heroes were also our greatest criminals.
You cannot legislate morality. In legislating and attempting to legislate morality, you create opportunities for people who do not follow the law.
Some call it bootlegging, some call it racketeering. I call it a business.
It fueled the Jazz Age and made the 20s roar.
It was the beginning of the time when boys and girls slept together. There was quite a lot of that going on, which astounded me from my innocent background.
Discover the true story of America's great experiment.
There was a myth of the person who breaks the law when it's a stupid law to give people what they want. Once the government begins forbidding things, then somebody will come along and say, I got it, step around the corner.
Don't miss the new film from Ken Burns and Lynn Novick, Prohibition, coming this fall, only on PBS.
It was on Elm Street in the commercial area of Georgetown. It was a real good front. The basement went right out through the back and out to the alleyway. Now, Dad would mix his alcohol there, and I siphoned a many a quart jar full of alcohol. I'd suck into it, and I'd get a mouthful, he'd say, swallow it. Oh, man, that was like swallowing fire water. That's what it was.
As his business expanded, as the demand for illegal alcohol grew, Donald Ward's father, Paul, found a neighborhood cop willing to warn him whenever their house was about to be raided.
This one night, a knock come to the window. Dad opened the window up, and they said, 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Dad set a quart of booze out, $100 bill, closed the window, and that was it. He sent me upstairs to tell my mother, called George, my uncle. He worked for the Wise Undertaking. He brought the hearse up into the back alley. They put everything in the hearse, and where did they go? The safest place that could be, the Arlington Cemetery. And he had a guard stand by, and he paid them money to watch it. Who Who's going to stop them? There's a hearse going into Arlington Cemetery. They're going to stop a soldier from being buried? No way.
My girlish delight in bar rooms received a serious setback a week or so ago in a place which shall, not to say should, be nameless. The cause was a good old-fashioned raid. It wasn't one of those refined, modern things where gentlemen in evening dress arise suavely from ringside tables and depart, arm in arm, towards the waiting patrol wagons. It was one of those movie affairs where burly cops kick down the doors and women fall fainting on tables and strong men crawl under them and waiters shriek and start throwing bottles out of windows. Lois Long, The New Yorker.
When the New Yorker magazine began weekly publication in 1925, its advertising prospectus vowed that it would be witty and sophisticated, and definitely not for what it called the old lady in Dubuque. 23-year-old Lois Long, the Vassar-educated daughter of a congregational minister, was assigned to cover the city's nightlife. Her pen name was Lipstick.
To the accompaniment of a slight shiver of outworn padlocks, Barney Gallant is doing business at the Old Stand. The place is dimly lit, comfortable, and decorated in modernistic bohemian fashion. The review is as bad as ever. I don't like to put any deserving black-bottom dancers out of a job, but I don't see why Barney bothers with entertainment at all. In a place as dark as that, people ought to be able to entertain themselves.
Lois Long's columns were laced with a wicked sort of sexual sense of humor. She openly flouted sexual and social conventions. She was a favorite of Harold Ross, who was the original editor of The New Yorker and who couldn't have been more different from Long if he had tried. He was a staid and proper Midwesterner, and she was absolutely a wild woman. She would come into the office at 4 in the morning, usually inebriated, still in an evening dress, and she would, having forgotten the key to her cubicle, she would normally prop herself up on a chair and try to, in stocking feet, jump over the cubicle, usually in a dress that was too immodest for Harold Ross's liking. She was, in every sense of the word, both in public and private, the embodiment of the 1920s flapper, and her readers really loved her.
Yes, sir, that's my baby. No, sir, don't be baby. Yes.
Texas Guinan, who is now carousing at the Salon Royale, has added to her show a girl who does a hooch dance with the aid of a real boa constrictor, a good 8 feet long. Since Texas's place is legitimately open until 7 a.m. or later, and is therefore the last stop on the nightclub world, you can imagine the effect of this on late arrivals, who are a little the worse for wear. The highlight of the week was the opening of the Club Mirador. I have never seen so many good-looking blonde women in my life as were present. The men were not handsome, but they looked like good providers. Rosita and Ramon are dancing at the Mirador and look so suspiciously Spanish that I am convinced they were born in Jersey City.
Most women who were working didn't make enough money to go to nightclubs to spend their evenings drinking and dancing in the arms of dashing young men. That simply wasn't available to most people. This is still a country in which there are deep inequities. But they could read about what it was like to be a young, single, liberated woman who goes to all the right nightclubs, who drinks all of the right liquors, who knows all of the right people.
Another thing that your most high-hat friends have recently discovered is the Cotton Club in Harlem. I cannot believe that most of them realize that they are listening to probably the greatest jazz orchestra of all time, which is Duke Ellington's. I'll fight anyone who says different. It is barbaric and rhythmic and brassy as jazz ought to be. And it is all too much for an impressionable girl.
Harlem had hundreds of speakeasies of its own, most hidden behind storefronts and tucked away in alleys. The Spider's Web and the Nest, the Garden of Joy and the Bucket of Blood, the Shim Sham and the Hacha and the Yeah Man, Connie's Inn and the Patagonia Club and Small's Paradise. Some, like the Cotton Club, allowed only white customers, but most were black and tans, eager to sell drinks to customers of both races.
Above 125th Street, the latest place visited was the Club Harlem. Your first impression is of very pleasing decoration. The second impression is of a grand blues orchestra. And the third is probably the most inferior collection of white people you can see anywhere. Possibly they are hired by the management to give the colored people magnificent dignity by contrast. But I don't know.
We used to go dancing up there, and the music, of course, was wonderful. It was a time when quite a lot of white people were up there. They were sort of interested to have us, and we were all ashamed to dance because they all danced so much better than we did.
What occasions the focusing of attention on the Negro? Granted that white people have long enjoyed the Negro entertainment as a diversion. Is it not something different, something more when they bodily throw themselves into Negro entertainment in cabarets? They camel and fishtail and turkey. They Geechee and Black Bottom and Scrunch. Maybe these Nordics at last have tuned in our wavelength. Maybe they are at last learning to speak our language. Rudolph Fisher.
In the dear dead days of my youth, some 5 years ago, the crude younger generation that gambled about the town used to dine out in all manner of places, carrying such a load of cocktails that further libations were not only unnecessary, but risky. In the new Speakeasies Deluxe, there has been a trend among bright young drinkers toward a glass of sherry before meals, a bottle of wine during dinner, port with the cheese, a liqueur with the coffee, instead of one highball after another. All of this is doing wonders for our young people. All of us are less likely to collapse utterly before we have time to be the fathers and mothers of the next horrendous generation. Lois Long.
By 1931, Al Capone was at the top of his game. He had no real rivals anymore among Chicago's mobsters, and he continued to expand his empire in case prohibition was repealed. He took over labor unions, chauffeurs, plumbers, city workers, motion picture projectionists, soda pop peddlers, kosher poultry dealers. And he toyed with the idea of going into the dairy business, because more people bought milk than booze. Besides, the markup was higher. Honest to God, he said, we've been in the wrong racket right along. Meanwhile, President Hoover remained determined to put America's most famous bootlegger behind bars, one way or another.
The income tax was a fairly new phenomenon, and a lot of people didn't understand it. And if you're a criminal and all your business, all of your income is illegally gained, it makes sense that you are not going to file a return and admit that you're taking in all this illegal income and tell the government, basically,
In case you hadn't noticed, I've been bootlegging for the past year, and here's how much I made. When the Supreme Court announced that, yes, illegal income is taxable, it was a great moment of confusion for all these criminals, and many of them went down and filed tax returns. Capone did not get around to filing, and neither did his brother Ralph.
For 2 years, the government tried without success to build a case, any case, against Capone.
President Hoover is sitting there with a group of investigators that couldn't find an elephant in a phone booth, paying these people a lot of money. Results? Zilch. None.
They couldn't get Capone on gun charges, they couldn't get him on murder, they couldn't get him on bootlegging. They thought they could get him on taxes, but even that was a very hard case to make because Capone was smart in this way. He kept no books. He had no bank accounts. He owned no property except for a house in Florida that he bought in his wife's name. He did everything in cash, and he seemed to pay out almost as much as he was taking in. It made it almost impossible for anybody to prove that he had income. The first time he sat down with the IRS and tried to settle, he admitted that he hadn't paid his taxes all these years. He said, I really didn't make a lot. I don't have a lot of money to claim. I've been just delivering beer, supplying beer. I'm a public servant, he said. I'm just doing it for the good of the people.
On June 5th, 1931, the United States finally accumulated enough evidence to indict Al Capone on 22 counts of income tax evasion.
Capone's trial was the story of the year. Reporters from all over the world were coming in for it. Actors from Hollywood were coming in because they wanted to play parts based on Capone. They wanted to see how he presented himself. Jimmy Cagney was there, and Damon Runyon came in from New York to cover it. The celebrity journalists were all coming in for this and partying with Capone at night before the trial. Capone had managed to beat every rap before, so I think he thought there was no reason this would be any different.
Capone's optimism was understandable. His men had bribed or threatened most of the people in the jury pool. But at the last moment, the judge got wind of it and brought in a whole new group of potential jurors. On October 24th, 1931, after a 10-day trial, Al Capone was sentenced to the stiffest penalty ever given to a tax evader, 11 years in federal prison.
The king of the gangsters is about to be taken for a ride by your Uncle Sammy. It's moving day for Scarface Al Capone. The camera boys are all ready, so look sharp. Here he comes. That's Al, wearing the big white hat.